So we'll say that the people present are Councilmember Hobart and myself, and the people that are not absent would be Councilmember Perkins, sorry, Councilmember Perkins. Number of additional folks here, and do I need to, somebody help me out, do I need to list those people that are here?
You don't have to.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dan.
Yes, sir.
So we do need to approve the minutes of the May 6th, 2022 meeting. Dan, would you like to make such a motion?
I would. I move to approve the May 6th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Okay, and I guess I'll second that since I'm the only other person here. And so I did look through them. They look good to me. So,
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And anyone opposed, then I guess there can't be anybody opposed since we both voted aye. All right. The next item for business is carryover business. I don't believe we have any, and the next item after that is management analyst items. Eric, do you have anything you want to raise for us?
I have nothing listed today.
Okay. Dan, I have some things I'd like to suggest for Eric to work on, since he's kind of new, and we've given him a whole month to get acclimated and getting his feet under him and figure out which way is up on city stuff and things. Do you want to take that up now, or do you want to wait and do that later under new business?
I think we should do it now if you're ready to.
Yeah, I'm ready to do that. I think my understanding, at least, and obviously I'm new at this, so help me out, anybody that wants to, if I'm struggling here, but so I would.
Jared, Mr. Pierce, let me do a little intro if that's all right.
Yeah, that'd be great, Dan.
Yeah. So some time back, the council passed an ordinance resolution that the Audit Finance Committee would direct the work of the management analyst. And so I've been putting together and have asked for submissions from the city manager and from city council members and the mayor. And I can tell you the items that I've received
Okay.
on that end. And then you've also got some suggestions. So what we'll do is today we'll sort of give him an outline of the topic areas, and I'd like to provide a bit more detailed written list, but it will just be a recitation of what we discussed today, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So why don't you go ahead, Jared, and if you want to go first, I'm happy to have you do that, or I can go ahead and list off the things that I've received. It's up to you.
Why don't you go ahead with the list off the things you've received, and I'll add to anything that I have on my agenda after that. And let me just check for first. Are you? I don't know how far out you are. Are you coming here, or are you?
I am. I'll be there probably in about. It's probably going to be about 20 minutes.
Well, why don't we wait and do that?
If you want to wait on this.
Yeah, let's wait and do that
Okay.
under new business when you get here. That way,
Sure.
we can. you can have a little, you can take a deep breath. It might be a little bit easier to do that in person than it would be over the phone if you're listing off a list of things that you
Fair
have
enough.
in mind.
You're right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the monthly financial presentation then. Mr. Kidney, I'm assuming that's you.
Yes, sir. Cindy was not able to join us in person today, so she asked me if I would take over for that. If you don't mind, I think what I'll do is just share my laptop, and I usually will just go through, update anything that you might have a question on in the monthly financial report. Now that I say that, I have May up already, although what was in the package was April since we had a deadline to meet. But I just want to first, let me pull up and remind people, if they're interested at home, which I'm sure everyone is, where they can find this information. It's under the city's website, under Finance Department, and then under Financial Reports is where you'll find these monthly reports. So you just go down. The latest one that we have is April. And Cindy had put together a nice little summary, which probably can't read from where anyone is, but just kind of give a quick update on where we are. Even though it says June, this memo was written in June, but it was about the April citywide revenues. And pretty much across the board, things are where we've been expecting them. I will show you, and it's a little bit of a busy graph here, but this shows our sales tax month by month over the years. So the light blue is fiscal year 20, purple is 21, and then the red is 22. Typically, the city runs through a sales tax cycles. You can see this, it kind of does this lumps through the year. And basically you have Christmas sales usually comes in like February. It's delayed for a couple months. So you'll see a bump in Christmas, you'll see a bump in the spring, you'll see the bump in the summer, and then you'll see a bump come up in like back to school in the fall. So that's what you're seeing in these peaks. And over the last couple of years, you see these really large peaks where it goes way down, then it goes way back up. What we're seeing this fiscal year on this red thing is that the dips are not as dramatic as they were. So it's getting back to pre-pandemic where we had a fairly solid basis of sales tax revenues coming in, and then we would have a smaller peak, if you will, of those bumps that we get. And so it's basically saying we don't have these big drop-offs like we had over the last 2 fiscal years. So our sales tax actually is right up to where we've been projecting. It actually looks like it's going to come in a little bit higher than what we've projected. And so we're pleased with that. That's definitely something that's helping all the funds, and you'll see them as you go through the financial statements. But I just kind of wanted to point that out, that the difference from the red, which is this current fiscal year, to previous years is our peaks are about the same as they've been. It's just the troughs are not as low. So it's just something, since I'm a nerd, I like to point things out like that. And so this shows this gradual increase in sales tax over the fiscal year. You can see this is year to date through April. We anticipate being right at or right over where we were this time last year through the end of June 30th. So again, right at what we projected. Use tax, also very positive. We met the cap, if you will, if you recall, animal services and the police use tax. The collections first go into those 2 buckets, if you will. You can see the amount, $762,000 for this year for animal services, and then $4 million cap for police. And then once those caps are hit, then use tax spills over into the sales tax funds based on their initial allocation. And we hit those caps in April this last year. So you can, again, this little yellow dot says over the amount over cap. And so you'll see all May and June, the use taxes will be going into those sales tax funds to help fund, the general street, parks, stormwater, and the regular police and regular fire sales. So again, that's very positive that we continue to see growth on the use taxes. Transient guest tax, and I know we'll be having a presentation by the director shortly after this, and he'll probably talk on this. This graph shows the guest taxes over the last several fiscal years. Obviously, you can see where the pandemic hit, and then you can see where the city's starting to recover from that. And just like the sales tax, we have a month-by-month showing where those are, and you can just see across the board, we're just doing just a little bit better than we did over last year, which is just a little bit over what we did the year before, and hoping to see this back up into the pre-pandemic days in 2023. In fact, our 2023 budget is basically projecting where we were back in 2019. Fund balance, of course, it's always been an important thing that people have been interested in over the years. We have roughly 3 different policies that we follow. If a fund is funding people, then we have a 16% of expenditures policy in there, and if it does not funding people out of that fund, then it's a 5%. And so what this table does is just basically take what the fund balances were, what the basis of calculation is, and then showing whether or not we're over or under the fund balance projections. And you can see the general fund, as we've discussed quite a bit, still continues to be under. And then the other governmental funds you can see are all over. Some of these larger balances are due to building up fund balance in preparation for pay-as-you-go funding in the CIP. And then finally, the last 3 are the 3 utility funds that have their own risk-based calculation for fund balances. And you can see, again, water and water pollution control are quite a bit over their fund balance minimums. But again, we'll show on this next page where their CIP will be getting into the fund balances on that. And then, as we've talked about before, the power and light is under their risk-based calculation for reserves. And here's a CIP program that just basically spells out the uses of those fund balances over time. And I think I mentioned the stormwater. You could see as $12.7 million over the next 6 years planned to be spent down on that fund balance. And then water and water pollution control both have a pretty significant increase in the amount of funding for line replacements that they'll be doing over the next couple of years to alleviate, that's the reason they built that fund balance.
Just a question on the water there in 2024. I was thinking that on Monday night, we heard the projection for capital improvements in the water. I was not recalling that they were dropping down to a low number in 24.
I do want to, I probably should have mentioned this before. This is the CIP program from 22 to 27. So it was what was based on last year. They have since developed a new CIP that will finalize basically the same time we approve the budget. Okay. So starting in July, you'll see the 23 through 28 CIP, and that has those increased costs in there.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Not really a lot to note, and there's just some verbiage here about talking about trends and things. I'll just go straight down to this general fund to kind of give the highlights overall. Just basically property tax, real estate tax. We have 2 distributions. The second distribution was in November, where essentially we collected everything that we thought we were going to collect in property taxes. And then in sales tax, as I said, we're coming in right at where we think or thought we'd be at, or actually right above. And you'll see these are for all the sales tax funds. April was 83% of the year. The collections were at 87%. So we're basically 4% over what we've been projecting over the years. A couple items: cigarette taxes and fines and forfeitures are the two areas that's been lagging in the general fund. And I think it's just a case we're just not really able to really put our thumb on the cigarette tax. We've tried to, we never seem to hit this projection very well. It's a smaller line item, but we're hoping we'll have to just cut that back in our projections next year. But then fines and forfeitures, where we kind of missed this year, is we had not anticipated the total impact of the new legislation that lowered court fees. We had projected one thing, and it was actually a little bit more significant than that. Our 2023 budget does take that into account, and we believe that we have that budgeted properly in 2023.
That was one of my questions here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the expenditure side, just two things to note. We have two departments that are a little bit over budget in the general fund. One is the city clerk, and that was due to additional election expense. On council meeting this coming Tuesday is a ordinance asking for a budget increase, and that to cover that. And you and I talked about that earlier, just how we take care of those. And so he'll address how where the funds are coming from to pay for that. And then the other ones that's slightly over budget is the fire department, which we knew about. Again, this just, the last couple of years have been pretty big strain on that department, and so this is a reflection of additional pay and overtime costs. And really the rest of these sales tax funds are right at what I explained as part of the sales tax projections that I showed earlier. So with that, I'll just, if you have any specific questions you want me to address or go through, I'd be happy to.
I do have a few questions. In the water, under utility fund notes, there, under water, and also on sewer, both of them are in the 40-some percentile for the year, which, since we're 3/4 of the way through the year, I thought that was interesting. Any specific indication as to why either one?
Yeah, so I'll pull up the actual expenditures here. So it's and what we're looking at, if you can see that, I guess you can't really see that too well, but total operating expenses are 46% of budget, and really where that is under capital, and it's just, again, it's a way that we budget here that we're looking at making improvements on. So historically, the departments, the utility departments will budget the current capital budget. So under original budget, you'll see, for example, I have water pulled up, is $6.4 million is what they're asking for 2022 expenditures is $6 million. However, then you'll see under amended, you have an amended $20 million in capital expenditures. And what that additional $14 million represents are projects that were started in prior budget years that just hasn't been completed. And so we keep those projects open. The money is there, and it just gets rolled over into the new budget year. And so what happens is then that really kind of messes up your percentages, because now instead of a $6 million budget, we're at a $20 million budget for capital, and we've only spent $2.8 million. So it makes the percentages just really come down. What we are planning to do on these reports for next year is when a capital program isn't done within one fiscal year, those dollars will be sent over into a capital project fund that we'll just keep track of separately. We'll report separately, but only those operations that you look at on a budget year to year will be reflected on these reports. So the management report behind it, if you look at this report right now, it's like, well, you've got, $20 million of capital that you were going to spend, but you've only spent $2.8 million. Well, they are behind on some capital expenditures, but what it really does is it really misleads and make it look like the whole budget is completely down. And so what we'll be showing on reports in the future, again, is pulling those capital projects out so the readers of the financials can really focus on the operational. Where are we with the current operational budget? So I guess what I'm saying, they're right on track with their operational budget should be. They're just behind on their capital projects, and that's both on water and wastewater.
And they've talked about that it's been hard to get materials and
Sure.
and other, and vendors will have been very difficult to get supply, and contractors have actually bailed on contracts because of things. So.
That's exactly right. And I just to follow up with that last part, the page that follows the operational report actually does show all the outstanding capital projects. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not, even though I say we're going to be moving the capital projects over to this fund, we're still going to be showing definitely where they are. Here's what they budgeted for that capital project, and here's the expenditures of the project. We don't want to lose that level of scrutiny and transparency. It's just going to, I think, show it a little bit better where you'll have an operational, how are we doing operationally, and then how we're doing capital. And combining those two really kind of misleads, I think, the big picture on that. So.
Okay, 3 additional questions that are more specific that I just had as I looked through the detail on these reports. Page 13, it'd be helpful for me if you could give me an explanation as to why we have a negative unassigned fund balance on the Community Development Block Grant Fund. We started out the year with a negative, we have more negative.
Sure.
And I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding that.
Sure. Our grant funds are some of the more difficult to actually to keep to budget, because it's based on, we don't receive the revenue until after we expend it. And then once you spend it, then you send in the expenses to get reimbursed for. Most of the CDBG and other grant funds are like that. CDBG is Community Block Grant Fund. And so under revenues, we're only showing revenues as cash in the door. It doesn't show our grant receivable. So we actually have, for every one of these expenditures, we have a receivable. We're expecting money from the federal government to reimburse us on that. And so that's just kind of a timing issue that we have. Now, in all honesty, yes, there's cash. We're borrowing from another fund to cover liquidity on that. But again, we have a pretty significant liquidity balance. And so that's not really a concern on this. And it's a pretty standard practice in other places. So CDBG grants, the grant fund, any of these grant funds, you're going to pretty much focus the same way.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, that takes care of 2 of my questions then.
Okay.
Let's see here. Maybe more than 2. No, workers' compensation is negative, and explain that one for me.
Sure. So when we're putting these reports together, what we want to show is we really want to make sure that we're tying things back to the audited financials. So let me try to find that page real quick. I get down on here. For those following at home, that's page 27. So what you're seeing is at the beginning of the year, we started with a negative unassigned fund balance of $8.3 million. The $8.3 million, that is a reflection of the full amount of reserves that we think will pay out for claims against us right now. So we do have some very large outstanding claims. However, we do know that all of those aren't going to be paid out in this current year. So we do go back and forth on this, trying to be consistent with all the funds. So that is our quote unquote fund balance, but that's not our cash balance. We actually do have cash in that fund. However, it's the net amount of reserves that we think will pay out over the next 4 or 5 years is this $8.5 million. But we feel that we have enough cash in that fund to cover the current year payouts the reserves that we actually have.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's helpful.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I think probably the way we should probably do these is also have a note on there of what the actual cash balances are, maybe explain that a little bit. I could jump over to the actual audited financials and I could show you where that is, where it shows where we do have cash, but the actual amount of future claims against us are pretty low. Personally, I like showing that, the negative, and I know it doesn't look good, but it really does show the fact that they're true liabilities that the city has.
That's
that we
our
have to cover.
expected liability. That seems like the right way to show it. It just, maybe a note to that state, that report or something that explains what that represents, if that's going to be on an ongoing basis or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
That might be helpful.
On especially workers' comp, this will be quite a bit lower. I will say, before we made major changes in this, that amount used to be minus 20 million. So over the last 3 years, we've brought it down to minus 8 million. So we've been very aggressive to make sure we help get those claims settled and paid off.
Okay, great. Mr. Hobart, any questions that you have before you get here?
I just pulled up, but I have a question on the revenue side. Mr. Kidney, when do we get the full effect of Wayfair?
I'm trying to remember what the actual statutory, I don't believe the full impact is going to be hitting us until the 2023 fiscal year. I think I see Mr. Mayfield in the room, and he's shaking his head yes. I don't think the full impact is until next fiscal year.
That's what I was recalling as well.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Hobart?
Meaning, okay. Gotcha. Thank you. That's all I had on this.
Okay. All right. Well, you've heard the questions from everybody that's present on the committee. So we'll go to the next agenda item. And did you have anything else, Mr. Kidney?
No, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So we'll go to the next agenda item, which is a report from on the tourism projection and tax forecast presentation for transient guest tax. So, Mr. Heidi, we're happy to have you here.
Let's see. Let me try to. Not sure this is sharing on the screen here. I have to ask for some help here. I apologize.
You can sit there. It's fine. You look good there.
That's whatever.
Yeah.
These are, so, do you have it up?
I just asked
lost Wi-Fi on this laptop, that's why. Fun. Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the council. Morris Heidi. My name is Morris Heidi, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. I appreciate the opportunity to present some information this afternoon. I wanted to mention also in attendance, I have Frank Burrow, who is our Assistant Director for Attraction Services over tourism, promotions, marketing, the museum, and historic sites. So just wanted to mention he is here as well. So this afternoon, a couple things I would like to cover. Talk a little bit about the transient guest tax, some background information on that. Also share some travel trends, travel industry trends, and then also some economic trends that are what I've observed are going to be or are affecting travel. Hotel lodging information, and then transient guest tax forecast. So this is information regarding the transit guest tax language. So back in April 1970, the Voters of Independence passed a transit guest tax that was a 4% gross receipts tax at that time. This was later increased to 5% and then to 6.5% in 2002, which is the current level of transit guest tax that is being levied. And I have there listed the 2002 ballot language. And at the tail end of that ballot language, it talks about the proceeds shall be expended for the promotion, operation, and development of tourism. So that's really the purpose behind what these funds are to be used for. So just some definitions, some terms related to those three words, the promotion, operation, and development. So really promotion is that promotion or marketing piece for marketing the city and the development of tourism. Operation is the operation and maintenance, so we use that for the museum, operating the museum and the historic sites. And the development is looking at adding tourism amenities or attraction or bolstering those attractions that we have. This slide shows the history for the last 10 or 12 years regarding the transient guest tax. And as Mr. Kidney mentioned, was going through the financial report, you can see on the far right-hand side of the column, that's quite a bit higher than previous years based on the transit guest tax report for May, which was the April funds that were collected. At this point, I believe we're going to almost be at $2.1 million, so that's why you see that number reflected so highly. So we're very excited. Obviously, averaged about 1.9 million for about 3 or 4 years there. That was kind of plateaued prior to COVID. Dropped to 1.5 in 2020 as COVID came in and affected a lot of travel activities. For FY21, that dropped to 1.3 million. Our budget for this year was 1.6 million, so we far have exceeded that. Even back when budget projections were due, I'd forecasted about 1.8 million, but this far exceeds even a projection back in March is what we're seeing for travel trends. So very excited about that. So a couple travel trends. COVID obviously has impacted a lot of travel over the last couple years. But it's also created, I believe, this sense of urgency to travel. So a lot of folks, what I'm hearing is, been cooped up, quarantined. A lot of the COVID has restricted travel. So now is the time to get out. This new sense of urgency to get out and travel. There's also a fear of, who knows what's coming next, or maybe another pandemic. And I don't mean to sound gloom and doom by any means, but I think this is just the general sense that a lot of folks are having. Whether that be, or mostly related to leisure travel is what I'm referring to here. So kind of this concept of, traveling, now is the time, now is the moment. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council report, 70% of leisure travelers Major countries plan to spend more in travel in 2022 than in the last 5 years. So this huge uptick in travel is what we're going to be experiencing. And then also with COVID and the lack of opportunity to maybe gather together with family, this kind of new style of travel, which is related to family reunions, really trying to get together, travel to destinations, reconnect with, aunts, uncles, cousins, family members, extended family, that they were not able to do for the last couple of years. The last 4 bullet points are kind of a negative travel trend, so kind of on the negative side, but fuel and airplane fares are obviously increasing, and I'll kind of speak to that in a moment. Worldwide, a lot of canceled flights are happening due to labor shortages, so that's certainly impacting the travel market. Inflation is obviously creeping up. News is 40-year high or so in inflation. That's certainly affecting travel trends. And then also, just as far as the corporate or the business side of travel, this concept of not having to necessarily be in person for meetings nowadays. Even as Chairman Hobart, was in on the meeting traveling back from Columbia, this idea that you can actually be involved in a meeting and not be in person. So that's obviously changed the prior to COVID practice of, having to fly or travel to a destination, stay in a hotel, and, meet in person. So, would share also, Frank and I met with the Hotel and Lodging Alliance, some representatives from that group yesterday, and they shared with us the youth sports and leisure market is still going very strong, but they're actually starting to see some of the construction crew traffic, staying in hotels is starting to drop off. So I thought that was an interesting trend that they're seeing.
I'll jump in right there real quick.
Sure.
Mr. Heidi, I would expect that construction crew business to pick up with North Point, hopefully, when they get going.
Yeah, this is more, I should clarify, that was related to not just Missouri, but several, one of the individuals we spoke to actually has several hotels in Texas. So that's not specific
Gotcha.
to our area. I should have clarified that,
No,
sorry.
okay, very good.
Yeah, certainly for North Point, we're really excited about that with the uptick in travel and constructions for the area, so. A couple economic trends affecting travel, CPI 8.6 higher than a year ago. Cost increases that we're kind of experiencing is affecting a lot of areas, not only personal life but travel. Kind of wanted to key in on the airline and the gas prices. Airline fares up 37, almost 38%. Gas prices almost 50%. I looked at AAA today. The national average for fuel, so this is nationwide. Gas is now at $5. I think that's the highest cost it's been at in the history of tracking that. Diesel at $5.79, so that's a 62% increase from a year ago for gas and an 80% increase for diesel. So that's nationwide. For Missouri, the average price of gas is $4.68, diesel is $5.32, and that's about a 70 and a 79% increase from a year ago for Missouri. So $2.76 for gas a year ago to $4.68, and $2.97 for diesel to $5.32. So not only affecting travel, but obviously also cost of goods, shipping cost, et cetera. So economic trends that are obviously filtering through the marketplace. And then also just inflation rising higher than wages for the last 10 months. So kind of concern as people think of discretionary income for leisure travel. And then major companies starting to freeze or cut back on job hiring, which obviously then cuts back on discretionary income for travel. So several trends that will certainly be affecting travel. This next slide shows the hotel lodging information for the last 4 months. So this is January through April. So the first, let me kind of explain this here. The Independence occupancy percent, the Kansas City, Missouri occupancy, the Missouri occupancy. So the left 3 columns of your screen there, that's hotel lodging line. We get that from the STAR report, STR report. The right 2 columns, that's the AirDNA report we received. So that's for the bed and breakfast market. So kind of 2 different pieces of information, but related to January, February, March, and April of this year. So currently, and again, we haven't received the May report yet, but as of April, we're at 60% occupancy for hotels and Independence. Kansas City typically runs about 2 to 3% higher. That's Kansas City metro area, so they're at 62.1%. Missouri typically runs 3 to 4%. That's a Missouri average, lower than Independence. That's just a trend that we've seen over the last couple of years. AirDNA, so B&B, bed and breakfast, Independence, they're about 55% occupancy, and then Kansas City, Missouri, bed and breakfast, about 58%. For April 2022, I looked back to occupancy for prior April 21, 20, 19, 18, taking out 2020, which was a 31% because of COVID. The average for the prior 3 years, again, taking out 2020, was about 56.9%. So we're actually a couple percentage points higher for April this year than we have been for the last 4 years, which is good news. And then below at the bottom of the slide there, I show the Independence year. So that's the yearly average as opposed to the monthly. So you can see the prior years, obviously, again, the impacts of COVID on 2020 and slightly affecting 2021 as well. But 19 and 18, about a 50%, 56% average. So that, again, a peak in the summertime, some peaks in the fall a little bit, but usually when you hit December, January, February, that's the lowest occupancy rates typically in the city. And then on the bottom right, for the April transit guest tax report, we have 30 contributors, so 24 hotels. I think the 5 is a typo. It should actually be 6 bed and breakfasts. I did not realize one actually contributes through Airbnb, and so we get it a separate way. Finance collects that, but there's 6 of those bed and breakfast, and then we have 1 campground in the city that contributes to transit guest tax. So looking at our crystal ball, and this is kind of difficult to do, looking ahead, and I'm trying to be optimistic here. I don't know. I think at some point, given all the economic reasons and the trends going on, we're probably going to see a plateau or even maybe a dip, a downturn slightly in the, especially as it affects the leisure travel. What I'm showing here is just a 0.5% increase, so it's not. It looks larger than on the graph, but just about a 0.5% increase over the next couple of years. I hope that's what we can at least stay even or have a slight increase over the next couple of years, but given there's such volatility in the economy and so many unknowns going forward, I think this trend, we're going to see a spike in travel, and then it'll either plateau or kind of drop off at some point here in the near distant future. I'm just not sure when that'll happen. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
World Cup 2026.
Yes, Very
So,
excited about that, yeah.
I would like, last night. Kansas City. We're a selected city. We're the smallest, 42nd largest metro area in the country, and by far the smallest one to get an award. Seattle, Houston, Dallas, several within driving distance of here. Denver did not. Chicago pulled out. So, we have got to capitalize on that.
Certainly, yes.
I mean, run them through the turnstiles wherever we can, because that, I would imagine we're going to have 100% occupancy in a lot of the total metro. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks would be looking for outlying suburban areas, maybe as a preference to, so we
They're
hopefully
not going to
we
have
can-
a choice.
We can, yeah, well, true, good point.
I mean,
yeah.
some will, yes, prefer the suburbs.
Yeah.
Some will like to be close to the stadium, and they may use Kansas too, I don't know, but
Well, hopefully we can at least get them on the Missouri side.
there will be a ton on the Missouri side.
Yeah.
Because there aren't enough rooms to fit all the fans for that long, I would guess. So, anyway, please put that on your radar.
Yep, and those are the type of things that Frank and myself, again, working with the Hotel Lodging Alliance, looking ahead strategically to what can we do to help, promote and prepare for and plan ahead for those events like that are pivotal in the city.
And what
So,
assets from the city can we use to get more people to stick around and
Yes.
do fun things here, not just in Kansas City or other places?
Exactly, yes, yep.
Because they'll be here for a week or two, and need stuff to do.
Yeah, trying to capitalize on that extra time that they can have to come visit our attractions, come to the square, eat in our restaurants in
it.
the city. Yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
That's my big comment. Thank you, Morris. Mr. Heidi?
Very good. Thank you.
Just a question, if there were, so as we look this year and we're in the upcoming budget, and this may be a little off topic, but it's dealing with the tourism approach. If we look at you've put additional funds towards tourism, towards historic property maintenance, and that's,
Correct.
Obviously we all have recognized that that's important, that's needed, and that's important to understand. But the question I would have is, if you had additional funds, and it wasn't earmarked towards the historic sites, what would you do with those funds to increase the tourism, on the tourism side of things?
I appreciate the question. Yeah, so I think one of the things is I'm a very analytical person. As I've looked back at the kind of the data points for marketing and the dollars spent, and I did a presentation back in February to the council at a study session regarding kind of the spending trends over the last 10 or 12 years. We have heavily focused it on the marketing and the promotion sides, a little bit on the maintenance side. The missing piece, back to that definition of the ballot language, the development of tourism. So if we had additional funding, it would really to try to develop some new attractions to draw people in, something that's can really excite folks, kind of galvanize an interest to revisit Independence. One option would be, looking at the National Frontier Trails Museum to see if there's, enhancements we can make at that facility. So that would probably,
Like a brand new one?
that would be a great possibility. So
Wouldn't it?
we would love to, the challenges that we face are, now this is good for the city as a whole and trying to get people to the city. The investment that was made in the Truman Presidential Library, huge investment, huge draw for folks to come in town. At some future point, National Park Service, having some additional amenities here, but having a city-owned attraction that would really help tell the story of Independence, the Queen City of the Trails. I think that's a missing piece that we haven't been able to, fill that niche, so to speak. What we have is very dated at the museum. And so again, to answer your question, if we had some additional funding not focused on maintenance at the current sites, that would be where I would push to kind of reinvest in that facility, probably by looking at potentially a new location with modern. If you visited the Presidential Library prior to the upgrade, it's night and day comparison with the technology. The exhibits are tactile for they want kids to pull knobs, and it's very, very involved with young children. Our museum is very old style, where it's heavily text driven. Don't touch things because they're artifacts, and we want. It's hard to tell a story if it's not an experiential type situation where you're kind of immersed in that story. So that's the piece that we're missing.
So it wouldn't be to put any additional money towards marketing or anything of that at this point?
Well, again, I think the balance, we've focused on that, and that's important, but you have to have something here that when folks get here, they're not disappointed. And I think that's where not investing in our historic sites as far as the maintenance side, and also with the museum, having something that's, we can really point to. And it would also be nice at some point to, I know there's been discussion, to have it be the National Frontier Trails Museum, have that, designation from the federal government. That's been kind of talked about for years, but that would really be a feather in our cap. To really tell that westward expansion story.
Sure. Okay, I think that's all I have.
Frank, we're sad you left. We're excited you're back. We're excited you cared enough to come back.
We definitely do. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Heidi.
Thank you.
return the chair to you, Mr. Hobart.
Well, I think that brings us back around to the management analyst items. And I'm going to, Mr. Green, so I sort of said this on the drive, but the way your job ultimately will sort of work is we'll assign you tasks, projects, and you'll come back on the regular audit and finance meetings and prepare reports and give us reports and updates and that kind of thing. So while you are an employee of the council in general, the way that it's structured is that you get direct jobs from us. That way you don't have 7 people every other day telling you, well, go do this or go do that. So, and I will prepare, and I did not prepare in time for this meeting a list or a priority list. So Mr. Fears and I will discuss that and use some today. But I will start with, I solicited tasks from the entire council and the city manager's office, and you're welcome to take notes. I will provide these to you in writing as well, so that it's, but we will just go through those now briefly. So, and there's probably a priority list in there. I know what my priority would be, but Mr. Fears, since he's here, will have equal say in that. So from the city manager's office, it would be helpful to Mr. Walker. There's 2 items that he asked about. One were our fleet maintenance operations. So we have, and I'm not an expert on this, but we have a garage that's city owned and operated. It's right down on Truman.
I've been there.
You've been there?
Yes.
Awesome. And some departments go there and other departments do their own. And so, or they go
Or
out
they
to,
contract them out or send them out, right?
right. So we've got not that big a city doing a lot of their own thing for fleet maintenance. So on this project, it really would be looking at what does each department do, and ultimately, hopefully, being able to make a recommendation of this is the most cost-effective way for us to move forward as a city with probably a consolidated fleet maintenance plan. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. The other thing that Mr. Walker requested is to review the administration and utilization of fire department overtime. That's a bigger project because you're going to have to dig through probably lots and lots of timesheets and whatever Mr. Kidney's office can provide to you in reporting, or the fire department. Okay, John Perkins has a passion for the homelessness, homeless folks in our city, our homeless residents. And we just recently got our health department status back. That's a status that's granted by the state of Missouri. And we abandoned that a few years ago, and then we got it back. Part of our drive has been that mental illness and homelessness and the correlation of those is important, and that homelessness is also a public health issue. So we'd like to, as we ramp back up with our health department, we'd like to have part of their focus be mental illness component, homeless component, something that's a little more modern than some of the services they used to offer. So his suggestions were the specific items. He wants a sort of a day-to-day rundown of what do homeless services look like, and how does that affect our health department? And these are kind of big picture stuff, some of them. What are the goals and the mission statement of our health department? What partnerships and collaboration does our health department use? and how good are those relationships? For example, we work a lot with comprehensive mental health. So what's that relationship look like? Who does what? How can we help each other out? In other words, you're sort of in the ground floor of helping us to sort of mold our health department as we start to get funding for it and start to grow it again. Okay? And then the last one was, how much state and federal funding are we getting? And are we using that? What's the budget look like? So then the mayor and I both have discussed this one, and I knew we were going to put Independence Power and Light on here. I'm sure you saw that somewhat recently we had a project proposed to buy some refurbished turbines, and we declined. The PUAB actually declined to recommend those. And so we have really got to make some decisions about power and light at some point. And this is personally what I would like to put at the top of your list, and Mr. Fears will have some ideas and he can chime in on this, certainly. But the mayor suggested doing a rate comparison over the last 10 years. It's going to be a little bit of work, but what we'd like to see is a very simple, what have our rates been, and what have they been compared to comparable cities. Now, some comparable cities are Springfield and Columbia. They both own their own utilities, just like we do. And so how are they doing and how are we doing in comparison with that? It's a simple ask, but not easy to get there. And the second part I'd like to look at is a profit and loss. I'd like to see a profit and loss statement for each of the last 10 years with IPL. So obviously we're really trying to put together a financial picture of power and light. Those make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Fears?
So I'll maybe add a little meat to a couple of those items that were mentioned. I too had discussion with city manager on and got the same list from him. So that's good that we got the same thing. But on the IPL question, that is of considerable interest and considerable concern due to the cost that we would have to undertake to do generation, additional generation. And so I think relative to the questions that Mr. Hobart's raised, first of all on rates, it'd be interesting in my mind to take a spectrum of our rate payers and say, okay, let's take a look at the median person in all the rate, all the whatever 14,000 rate payers we have or however many are. Let's look at the median. What would that person, given their history on, pick a date, and on the last 10 years, what would that person pay in in these other cities? And then same thing, given, if they used X number of kilowatt hours, what would that cost in whatever city it might be? And then take that median and then take a look, at some other, maybe 100 on each side of the median, another 100 on each side of the median, and kind of look at the different, for different spectrums and see if, or different places on the, from a high rate payer to a low rate payer, what would they be in terms of looking at those? I think that would be helpful information, and if we could look at that, and I would say not only look at city-owned utilities, but I think it's helpful to look at, you know, a handful of other utilities in the Midwest here, just from a standpoint of, you know, I mean, we compete with Evergy real closely, and so, you know, what would it be there? I think,
That'd be KCMO primarily.
right,
Liberty, there's a number that get power from there. Lee Summit actually is a real good comparison, since we butt up to them and they don't own their utility. So some that do, some that don't.
right.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep, no, that's good. That's, did that help any at all, or did that just complicate things?
I definitely have to clarify with you. I think I understand what you're saying. I'd want to ask a few more information about that to get a better understanding of it, but I think I generally grasp what you're saying.
Okay. And then on the you know, I've seen a lot of charts in different things relative to profit and loss that Mr. Hobart's talking about. It would be helpful for me to see that 10-year history like he's talking about, but it would be helpful to see it with any specific things that happen with any major things that happen with our rates at given points in time. For example, you know, we did a reduction in rates at one point in time. That would not be nice to have that on a timeline to kind of see what were the major impacts of, you know, we had a reduction in rates. Okay, we gave back $10 million to ratepayers in a refund, and how has that impacted the profit and loss of the utility? I mean, those kinds of things would be, anything major, I think, would be helpful to see in that as well. And so yeah, the IPL was certainly top on my list as well. I am interested in the homelessness issue. I had lots of questions and concerns from citizens about that, and so I am interested in that piece of the puzzle. And the challenge there, and I'm not sure that I wouldn't expect you to have answers to this necessarily, but the challenge is if there are major positive things that other communities are doing relative to homelessness and having, you know, high degrees of success, it would sure be nice to know that. I'm not sure that exists out there, to be honest with you. So I may be asking for something that's not even, you know, available. But if there were things that, you know, other communities are doing that where they're seeing high degrees of success in reduction of the homeless population, that would be really nice to know.
Understood.
So what we'll do now, you're welcome to ask any questions. It's a good time to ask questions if you want.
What I want to do at this point is, since you can provide me the list, what I want to do is see the list in full, and then what I can do is go back and forth and discuss those with you a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
But at this point, I don't have any questions.
It all sounds fine.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, good. That's good. I'm glad. And some of it will be tougher than others, and I appreciate you. But we'll get you some decent amount of work here to finally get going, which is good. And Jared, so what'll happen is I'll drop a memo. Jared will look over it. I'll probably send it to John Perkins too, since he's not here today, just to make sure that he doesn't have any other comments. We'll make a priority list. At that point, I don't have any desire, this committee shouldn't, I don't think, have any desire to micromanage you. So you really will sort of be on your own to make your own work plan, to decide if you're going to do a little bit on each, or you just like to do one thing and nail it and move on to the next. Those kinds of things will be your choice, unless you ask us otherwise. Mr. Fears would be happy to personally make you a schedule, I'm sure. I would not.
I have no intention to do that.
And
So-
I appreciate that.
So, but what we will expect next time when we have our next audit finance meeting is I would like to have something in writing as to what you worked on. It can be small, it can be one page, it could be a summary. I don't need to see 100 pages of notes. I wouldn't ask for that, or time entries like I have to do for clients. Not that at all. Simply, this is what I'm working on. These are where I've gotten to, and everything's progressing nicely. If you need our help on something, a bigger thing. In the meantime, you're welcome to reach out to us to discuss any questions or problems. And what we'll probably do is I'll get this list together. I'll get it cleared with these guys. Next week we can get together, have lunch, or meet in your office or something. Meet in City Hall, and we'll go over it.
And I think the other piece of the puzzle that will be helpful to us as you look at this list would be, what kind of general time frame you think it's going to take to do a specific, project. That might help us give you some feedback relative to priority wise. I mean, if you, for example, the fire overtime issue that Mr. Hobart, mentioned, that may be a real long and drawn out project. And so if it was, then, that we might, certainly, I would want to move that down the priority list a little bit at the moment, given some of these other priorities. But again, we can work out the details of that, so.
I'd be happy next time, give you a list of time for, whatever you want, I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate
We appreciate that, yeah.
We very much appreciate that, and we appreciate your patience in coming on board and starting to learn the city a little bit. We appreciate that very much, because we need your help.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's one other major, I was gonna ask Mr. Kidney, if you don't mind me asking you a question about, I believe it was reported in the paper, or it's been reported in the news, the legal defense the money we've spent for defending the class action lawsuit at IPL. Was I right in saying that was public? Does that sound right, Mr. Fears?
I've heard it from other sources outside the city, but I don't know what those sources were. I mean, what the origin of those sources were, so I don't know the answer.
Tell you what, I'm going to confirm that before we talk about that, since we've done some of that in executive session. But maybe for next month or our next meeting, an agenda item could be just the dollars that we've spent on that.
I'm guessing
and if
that
there's
would-
any sort of projection that we can get from our lawyers, what we might be looking to spend. Does that make sense?
Would that number be in our financial statements, or?
No, I shared that amount at the last executive session that we had.
I know you did. If it's been made public and somebody got it, that's the only reason I would want to just briefly touch on it. I don't, if something's been made public that was otherwise secret, but now it's public, I don't want the people to think we're like hiding the ball. I want to be transparent and give whatever information is fair to give.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and absolutely, that number would be public if asked.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware, I have a Google term. I get notices all the time whenever legal stuff about independence
I gotcha.
comes up. And I've not seen that actually unless it was like a Facebook post or something like that.
I've heard it from other people too, and maybe that's just what it was, rumor going around. I don't know.
Okay.
But
Absolutely, I can bring that, and anything else you guys might have about the.
well, we
impact
want,
of
once again, executive session is sacred, and if it's safely locked behind that still, we will leave it where it's supposed to be. If it got out somehow, then I think we should
Yeah,
at least touch on it. That's all. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. The actual dollar amount that we've expended on, for defense of that is discoverable.
Yep.
And I'm not, somebody may have asked that and
They
someone
may
just
have.
ran that. But it's certainly something that I could share.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Kidney. Mr. Green, I jumped an aisle there. Did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And you don't have anything else, Mr. Kidney?
I do not, thank you.
Um,
Except for next meeting.
Correct, which is, I was just gonna get to that. So, Mr. Fears, I was thinking, as finance has gone through the budget, and as Mr. Green is just getting started, does it make any sense to you to skip a month? Would you be fine with that, or do you wanna come back in July?
I'd be, sorry, I'd be fine with that if, with the caveat that Mr. Green can talk to us about any of the projects that he has, he's undertaken, and that if he's got, needs some prioritization or anything, that we deal with that outside of this, as long as we can do that.
Very good. Well, I want to recognize the staff. We should finalize the budget next week at council meeting, and that's a massive lift. I know your work's mostly done on it, but there's always changes at the last minute. And plus, summertime people travel, if they can afford it at this point. I paid $6.49 a gallon for premium gas in Nashville last week, and regular was $5.99. So we are bringing the average down. That's something. But we'll at least take 1 month off. And are you okay with that, Mr. Green?
Yes.
And in the meantime, we can, we'll be in more communication now going forward.
Yeah,
Members of this committee and you.
Sure.
So we'll find a time that, if you don't mind, you can give us an update, sometime before the end of July. And
Yeah, during council meetings and before council meetings, anytime.
yeah, sure.
Anytime.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, unless anybody, so let's pick a time in August before I adjourn the meeting without having a next date picked.
Well, if we stuck with the third,
The 19th,
that would be the 19th.
that's actually probably the only, that's perfect for me, actually. Is it? Are you taking off that day? Maybe. I'm gonna be gone the week before that and the week after that, so it's actually a really good time for me, is the 19th.
Yeah, that's a pretty good day for me as well.
If you can't attend, Mr. Green, because you're doing personal business, you can be excused. Absolutely. Don't wanna, if that works for Mr. Kidney.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. I will say, the way that works out, by our previous agreements, we want to get the full packet out the Friday before.
Oh, and that messes up, because we were gonna go to the last Friday, weren't we?
It doesn't mess it up, it just, we would not have the July financials in that packet.
Yeah,
We would include the June 30th financials, which is actually pretty,
pretty recent.
would be a pretty reasonable thing to do, and then be able to be ready to discuss the July financials, but the packet would not include the July financials, and that's the only caveat I would have on that. Unless you want to, if you don't want to wait. No, I'd rather stick to that Friday packet out the week before. It seems like that works out.
No, I
really
like
well.
that.
Unless
I like
we-
that too.
Unless we shift away to a different day than a Friday.
Yeah, well, we can discuss that too if you want.
I mean, I'm just thinking, if it helps, we could do Thursday the 25th, or
I'll be gone that week.
you're gonna be gone the whole week.
I'm going to Scotland.
Well, good for you.
I guess I could show up by teams, actually.
Yeah, it'd be the middle of the night for you.
Need to be sober.
I'm a hardworking man, come on.
Well, let's stay on the 19th.
Let's give the 19th a shot, and let's make a note on the agenda, Brian, Mr. Kidney, to discuss changing the day. And at that point, we can also discuss changing going to quarterly.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's do both of those at that point.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
I am open for anything.
Oh, I did have one more question. Have you heard from our buddy in Washington on payroll software? Isn't that where he is?
Oh, wrong. I was thinking
Ron.
DC. Ron, yeah, Ron.
I always
Luce
think Chester,
with,
but it's Ron.
No.
Ron Luce.
No.
I didn't mean to catch you on the spot here,
You
but I did.
did. Look at that. I got a message from Cindy. We are developing the RFP currently for the payroll, or the timekeeping. I believe you're talking about the timekeeping.
Timekeeping, that's what I
Yeah.
meant.
So
Timekeeping.
the RFP is being developed as we speak. Yes, is what she
Okay.
said. So that's where we are with that. Is that
Give me the loose timeline. RFP will be done in a month or more.
I tell you what, we'll give you a heck of a timeline. We'll give you the complete schedule at the next Audit Finance meeting.
Perfect.
Okay.
I would love that. It's obviously with certain matters. By then, we'll have the report on the police overtime.
The RFP will be out in the next 3 weeks. I just got that message.
Lovely. Well, we look forward to that. Please keep us updated, and that is a priority, so thank you. With that,
And hang on,
Mr.
and here's a question, when we skip a month like this, do you email us out the financials, or do we do both, will we do both May and June at that August meeting, or what would we typically do?
Well, this would be kind of precedence either way. So we post the financials on the 15th of every month. So those are out there, and I believe I showed everybody where you can find those on the website.
Right.
But
we
Lindsay,
still make them put them on the agenda, Jared.
Lindsay's,
For all three, whatever period.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's what
We'll
I
get
wanted to
those,
know,
but
yeah.
To the May 6th minute? Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, sorry.
So, but we'll also, I'll just ask Lindsay, since she's on the meeting right now, just to also send you specifically the three committee members a link to the whenever we post the financials. So you'll
Right.
it'll get posted, you'll see it, it'll have the memo on there that
Yeah.
Cindy puts together. And then what I'm hearing from you is we'll put on the financials in the packet for whatever has not been reviewed up to that date. So if we go out to August, we'll put May, June, and potentially July financials in that packet. I think is what it'll be thick.
Yeah,
Okay. But, I mean, it's all electronic.
we don't, our printing council member is no longer with us, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Mr. Fears, anything else?
No, I'm good.
I've just been notified. I do need to make a motion to do one amendment to our May 6 minutes that were already approved. I need to make a motion that Eric Green be added as an attendee to those minutes.
Yes, that's accurate. Second that motion.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Since we've done it, we agree. Motion passes. I'll direct staff to make that correction. Okay, unless there's anything else from anybody here, we are, anybody? Adjourned. Thank you.